Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com, and today we are going to be reviewing a hand from a $5,000 buy-in tournament that I final tabled. This is from the World Series of Poker, I believe 2 years ago. And this hand and the next three are going to show you how I went from having a pretty good chip stack to none. So at this final table, as you can see, I only have notated Dan O'Brien's chip stack and my chip stack. It's worth pointing out that there are no other incredibly short stacks at the table. If there were short stacks, people who had maybe 10 big blinds or something like that, that would drastically change the play a lot of the time. But in these videos, just assume that everyone is, 20 big blinds or more. As you can see, Dan O'Brien has about 33 big blinds, and I'm in the big blind with about 60 big blinds. So I get pocket tens. It's a pretty good hand, certainly acceptable. Dan O'Brien, who is generally tight aggressive, he doesn't do too many things that are ridiculous. He makes it 75,000, so 2.5 big blinds. And they fold around to me in the big blind. And at this point, I think I have to figure out if I can profitably get it all in versus Dan O'Brien in this spot. There were a few somewhat weak players at the table. And when I say weak, you have to realize that weak for a $5,000 buy-in tournament often does not mean horrible. It just means maybe not that great. Maybe they're a little bit too tight. Maybe they're a little bit too loose. So I don't view Dan O'Brien as a soft spot or anything like that. I think he plays very well. So do you want to tangle with one of the best players at the table? There were, I believe, two other very good poker players at the table and a few of the other people who I did not quite know. And I think the answer is I'm not really trying to play big pots versus Dan O'Brien. Notice if I happen to play a big pot and lose versus Dan, now all of a sudden he's going to be two to my left, or player to my left, and then there he is, and he's going to have 60 big blinds, and I'm going to have the 30 big blind stack, and that's not really where you want to be. But at the same time, if we could eliminate a very good player, that is fantastic. In this spot, I thought that if I re-raised, Dan may fold out hands like Ace-Jack and King-Queen, or he may decide to shove hands like pocket nines, pocket eights, pocket sevens that he may decide to fold, or he may get off the hook with if I do just call pre-flop. So this is kind of a nasty spot. And you're going to find that hands like ace, queen, and pocket tens and pocket nines usually fall in this situation where you don't really want to get it all in. Like if I knew that he would be willing to put in 33 big blinds, well, yeah, I would prefer to just not do that. I'd rather call and see a small flop, or see a small pot. But at the same time, I don't really mind cashing out my equity, which sort of means that if I re-raise and he folds, he's usually going to be folding an inferior hand, but sometimes it's going to be a hand that has overcards like King-Jack, Queen-Jack, King-Queen, Ace-Jack, stuff like that. And if we can get him to fold out those hands, obviously re-raising is fantastic. So I assume that he would be playing somewhat straightforward, somewhat face-up versus me. So I decided to re-raise to 230,000. So notice this is a little bit large. He made it 75. I made it a full 3 times what he made it. And then after a bit of deliberation, he decided to go all in. That's not what we wanted to see, but it is what we have. So now we have to figure out which hands is he going to be going all in with, just to confirm that we can very easily call here. I think he'll be going all in with a range that looks something like this. Some players will call hands like ace, queen, pocket tens, pocket nines, etc. But if he's shoving a range like this, let's give him this range. Let's give us pocket tens. And you can see that we're winning right at 44% of the time in this spot. So if that's his shoving range, now we have to figure out our pot odds. Right here, we have to put in, well, I made it 230. So I have to put in 1 million minus 230, which is going to be 770. So I have to put in 770 to win 2 million total. So that'll be 2,000. Oops. Equals. So I need to win 38% of the time here to break even, assuming I don't care about the payout implications. And notice here that if I do lose this pot, I'm still going to have 33 big blinds. So I am not concerned with busting. Dan has to be concerned with busting, but I do not have to be concerned with busting so much. Given we need to win, or we're going to win about 44% of the time, and I'm probably going to win about 38, or I need to win 38%, I'm going to win about 44. I think this is just a call. if we tighten up Dan's range, like let's say we take out ace queen offsuit and pocket nines. Now, as you see, we drop down to about 36% equity. So now it actually becomes a lot closer. What happens though if we think Dan's all of a sudden getting after it because he's fed up with me for some reason? Maybe he's shoving a range like this. And if that's the case, then we are in great shape. We actually have 54% equity. So it's always difficult to know exactly how much equity you have in these spots, especially if you call and your opponent turns up, pocket kings or something like that, because you don't know how low their range goes. But in this spot, I do think that we have to call. I think once I put in the 3-bet, I have to be prepared to make the call. If I was not prepared to call the all-in, I think I should have just called Dan's initial pre-flop raise and then saw flop and hoped to flop well and then not have to play a giant pot after the flop. Anyway, given all that analysis, I do decide to call off. And we're against ace-queen suited. So that hand, I don't think, is very telling about Dan's range. I think that is one of the hands that usually fits pretty cleanly in the top of his range. And notice that he's actually in a kind of similar spot to me whenever I 3-bet him, because he doesn't really want to call and see a flop with this hand. He would usually rather shove or fold, and the hand's just a little bit too good to fold. So he's sort of forced into shoving. And this happens sometimes in tournaments where two good players get these marginal hands that either of them could have played it differently, but they both took the aggressive line and someone's going broke. Well, the shorter of the two stacks has the opportunity to go broke. I'm really been leaning more towards not playing big pots in this situation recently. And I think that's generally going to be a pretty good strategy because you don't want to be flipping for all of the money or for a lot of the money. That's usually not a good strategy because, well, half the time you lose a big pot, and you'd rather just not lose a big pot half the time. You'd much rather lose a small or a medium pot half the time if the alternative is play a big pot. But despite that, I think in this scenario, I don't really have much of an option because I think my hand's a little bit too good, and I think Dan is probably aggressive enough to where he's going to be raising too many hands pre-flop, and if I do call pre-flop, he's often going to make me fold incorrectly after the flop. So say, for example, he did raise with ace-7 suited or something like that. Flop comes king-8-6 like it does. I'm going to check. He's going to bet. I'm going to call. Turn's going to come. I'm going to check. And if he bets again, well, now I have to fold. And I really don't want to fold. So I think in order for my hand to play, in order for me not to get bluffed off of my hand, I think I just have to be willing to get it all in. And I'm sure some of you are watching this thinking, yeah, obviously get it all in with 10s. But I don't think it's that easy. I think if my hand was a little bit worse, like 9s or ace-queen or ace-jack, something like that, I think calling pre-flop and just trying to play my best after the flop is going to be the right answer. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below. I will talk to you next time.